Well, what do you know? It's about that time where we have to sit down and talk about what is to come, what is worth it or what is not worth it. And man, okay, let's just set it off the gate. It's early to say anything, although we can set up a premise on the reasoning on maybe why some of the people that are a little bit, I don't know, let's say cautiously optimistic regarding Dragonflight and the ones that are super hyped. I think we're going to try to mash them all together and talk about, is it worth to either come back to Dragonflight, or if you never played World of Warcraft, would Dragonflight be the expansion
for you
to come back started?
Well, I mean, this all started since we've had people on stream and in comments talking about Dragonflight and if it's worth coming back and things like that. So even though, like Marcelian said, it's kind of early to tell, we can actually draw comparisons between the state of Dragonflight now and how Shadowlands was. Not to mention a lot of comparisons between other things like the mentality of the devs, the team 2, and how they're looking at designing the game and what they've been doing realistically since what, 9.15 or something like that, which is not Dragonflight, but it is been going on for a year-ish.
Yeah. True. It started from 9.15 to be honest, but before like getting into like the comparisons, because we are going to do a lot of comparisons, as Flame mentioned, on Dragonflight and its state of development versus BFA and Shadowlands as well. I'm going to go for BFA too. Let's just note down like the main concerns on why, and valid points on why people are kind of like, okay, I'm not gonna, get off my seat just yet. So if you're gonna look back at traditionally what has been happening in World of Warcraft, at least, okay, the trend kind of started in Legion, but it really started to hurt in BFA. So basically, we can talk about the false promises they always make, and that full cycle you're getting when you have to grind your ass off, you have to do a lot of chores in order to be able to, I would say, feel the game, not compete, because competing is a whole different can of worms. Just feel the game for what it is, and it's a whole completion. So the chores and the mindless grinding, that kind of started mainly more prevalent in BFA. And they always said it, we're gonna next patch, we're gonna have, this system to catch up and this system to catch up, and no
as
currencies, and blah, blah, blah. And it always happened in the last patch or the last 0.5 patch that was like the best time to like return to WoW, because you had all of this accessibility, and even that was kind of gated and limited. That was BFA.
That is in BFA, and they're doing it now right now, and still it feels like every time whenever they're taking the systems like, oh, you had to work through this and go through like gating, now it's all accessible. I mean, we had the Mage Tower open all the time in 7.35, right? And then we had corruption vendors in 8.3, and now we have the dinars that give you the best weapons, all the raids accessible, transferable cosmic flux, transferable resources throughout all of the covenants, instant skips to all of them. So that is indeed happening, and it's good that it's happening, but it's kind of nice not to have to wait an entire expansion to wait until the end.
That's the cycle we kind of got used to, and everybody kind of has a valid point on this. They're like, I know a lot of people who quit because of this, because they promised something that would not happen, and it did happen. I will go into this next phase. So okay, we noted down like the grinding cycle and the lies. Now we're gonna go into like the actual things they said they will do and did not do, or rather they're saying something would not happen and it did happen. So this is mainly an example of Shadowlands, where they did say that, okay, at the launch of Shadowlands, you're gonna have Covenants, Soulbinds, and Legendaries, and that's it. Well, 9.1 came along and you got the shards, and that was a pain to get as well. It was very RNG, very grindy. This also, just circling back a little bit to BFA, I have to mention that although essences were a good fix to the problematic Azerite traits, man, the grind you had to do for some of those essences was just ridiculous.
Blood of the enemy, man. Blood of the enemy.
that was that. Blood of the enemy is one good example. Conflict and Strife, the PvP one, which was very good in PvE as well. If you were kind of forced to do PvP even if you didn't want it to, and vice versa. So getting back into Shadowlands, 9.1 came around, we got the shards, and that was very, very disappointing. We were also promised a super scary, huge, interacting open zone, which presumably that was the Maw, and boy, what a letdown was that. It was a big opportunity, I would say. I think they kind of like wanted to do them all as maybe how Zerath Mortis is right now, which is a lot more free, a lot more open, a lot more, I would say,
interactive.
I still, even though the patch hasn't been out for quite a while, I still enjoy just logging in while I'm waiting into a Q4 or LFR or something. I'm just enjoying doing world quests over there and grinding some cosmic flux or whatever, searching for treasures and all of that. It's still good. It gives me a slight remembrance of the old timeless style. That being said, this is the other valid argument, right? The things they say, especially Ian, saying things that this won't happen or this would happen, and neither of them come into fruition as the player base would hope. The third thing I would put down is the actual ignorance and right down kicking on the head of the community feedback. This has been happening for the longest time. And it's a valid point once again for people being, you know, a little bit concerned, a little bit not that hype for the expansion. It happened. Like, do you guys remember? Do you remember the old Josh and Ian vlogs that they used to do?
Oh, the dev Q&As back in BFA. Oh yeah, I remember that.
So there was so many burning questions, and they always picked like once in a blue moon you would get like a decent question over there, but the rest was like all like unnecessary, unimportant things that would burn it up under the hood were never addressed, right? And that was like when you saw the forums, when you saw the Reddits, when you saw content creators, streams or whatever, you know, talking about issues and talking about stuff, they purely ignored them. And that circles back to how they manage the feedback from the people that got into alphas and betas and were posting regularly on the alphas and betas forums back in BFA, alpha and beta back in Shadowlands. Most of the issues that these expansions have experienced were addressed, were feedbacked already by a lot of people over there. They never did anything about it. So that kind of gave away this attitude towards the player feedback and player community that, you know, man, we know better. It's always like we know how you want to play the game. We know how you want to have fun.
Oh yeah, I remember this, and all of the mentality that they had around Titan Forging and Atom Level and all of that stuff, and then they've changed it. So it was definitely a weird time, and it hasn't been going on just in the last couple of expansions. It's been going on for a long time, and you know, we're talking about all of this, and you know, it's not the same now. It's
not the same now, but we do have to point out why. I mean, there's obviously a lot more reasons on why people are not necessarily hyped, or they're still having their doubts about it. So these are like super valid points, and I've seen it time and time again. I would say one of like I'm pointing this out to be the last. So since the scandal from last year,
yeah,
I think it was very apparent for a lot of people that were, you know, either not enjoying the game as much, regardless if it's story-wise, gameplay-wise, you know, grinding-wise or whatever. I think it was clear for a lot of people that the atmosphere, the vibe, the general workflow over there wasn't the best, let's say.
Oh, well,
I think a lot of people suffered during the development of patches and expansions, and it kind of shown. Plus, I do believe that people in charge in specific departments of all development were very, very how do I put this? Authoritarian. So they didn't really budge on anything that was like suggested or feedback. It was basically do as I say or get the fuck out.
No flexibility. And
Nothing,
with that, I mean, that is pretty much the elephant in the room, because there were all these issues that led to people stopping playing or paying the subscription in Shadowlands, and maybe even earlier than that. But you can actually attribute a lot of this to the work environment, because it is important, since, you know, the devs are, at least some of them are passionate about the game, and we've been talking about this for years and how they've been having that passion exploited for years. But because they love the game and the way they do it, obviously if they're like in a weird environment, even if they had like a great idea of let's not put any more player power, let's not put any more grind, you still end up with stuff like Korthi. I think maybe Korthi is the best example of what maybe like a depressing and oppressive and dark environment can create, and that's exactly how it felt in game as well. That was at the time, and obviously things have changed, even if it's on the surface. But you can actually, since we've kind of had our fingers dabbled into pretty much everything since the last couple of years, we kind of get a feeling of how things have changed, at least in a way. And you can tell, first of all, you can tell with what they've done in Shadowlands so far, with how, first of all, Zereth Mortis is. If you really compare every other Shadowlands zone and content with Zereth Mortis is like that morning when you wake up after a long night of sleep and you pull up your drapes and the sun finally shines into the bedroom. I mean, we can talk about like super obvious things like the color palette being very vibrant, very lively, being there a lot of light and a lot less annoying stuff to do. And we can talk about less obvious things like catch-ups, like crutches, like creation catalyst, like all of that good stuff that solved a lot of problems like, you know, loot and catch-up and alt and stuff like that, even though Shadowlands...
Yeah, on that point, this is valid only if you played in Shadowlands and have a couple of things checked. So all these catch-up mechanics Flame is mentioning, I think a lot of people know this, but just to clarify, if you did not do all the Shadowlands story chapters, if you do not have a Covenant renowned to 80, then this does not apply, my friend. This is like the disease that was created by them. So a new player joining now will have, oh my god, the worst time of his life to get to enjoy the full game. Yes, I do believe the changes that Flame mentioned are like in most of their capacity directed to do existing player base. This is one key difference. This is probably one of the things that they kind of switched moving forward from 9.1.5 all the way to current day, because that's when, you know, the shift has occurred, is that, okay, we have these bad boys still playing the game, let's make right by them. Surely not perfect, but definitely improvement in a lot of capacity. So after noting down all the negatives and all the not all of them, but the biggest ones, there's a lot more. But after noting these down, now we can go on why we believe Dragonflight, at least for its beginning, we cannot make any like predictions for the whole expansion.
The ball is in their court. It's
for sure.
their game to fuck up.
But for sure, there's a lot of reasoning, like there's a lot of motive if you look behind the scenes on why this could potentially be one of WoW's best expansions yet, and one of the expansions people should come back to. And it's a bold statement, I know, but again, this is based on us being there since, I would say, during the Legion expansion, and then always being there since like alphas and betas for BFA, Shadowlands, and now Dragonflight. Okay, so this is based on that. Seeing the game for what it was, you know, seeing people come, leave, seeing feedback from everybody, seeing the whole process come and go. So why Dragonflight would be I would say, good starting point or a good return point for a lot of the players. Where first off, Flame kind of hinted on this. The way the current standing of development is looking right now, it's very, very different from everything we experienced in other development cycles.
It's night and day difference, man. Like starting with the mentality of how, and obviously the environment that changed over the last year, and people being a lot more open-minded, and a lot more, oh, finally I can work on what I want to do, and you can see that being translated. But most of all, like in terms of mentality, I think what surprised us the most was the communication, and the communication channels enabled and opened from the devs towards the players. Obviously, there's still kinks to work out. There's always going to be something like that. But looking at the community, the community council, the constant feedbacks and replies to the forums, and with all of that,
not to all classes, but
not to all classes, but even so, if we take like, let's say the elephant in the room, priest and druids, priests have had just a couple of days ago and a week or 2 weeks ago a post saying that, you know, changes are coming. They just take a little bit longer, and now we also know what the changes are. We just need to wait for them to actually be implemented on alpha. But what's even more interesting, because this is all fair and nice, but what's even more interesting is that the changes are actually stemming from players' feedback. Well, you know, the big brain theory crafters that actually pointed out, I was like, listen, this doesn't really work with that, and if you take this, you won't have that, and whatever. That sort of stuff is basically what's being put into the changes to all the classes, which this, I mean, I don't remember the last time when they actually did this, when they listened to players like, okay, I see your guys' point, let's do that.
It's a tricky line when you like constantly listen to player feedback. This has happened in the past, and it kind of went into a shit show. But I think their approach right now is a little bit more surgical, a little bit more filtered, and I think it's for the best. Yeah, sure, not all classes and not all aspects of the alpha are replied to as some of the other ones. Like, you know, obviously classes and talent trees are a big focus because it's make or break the game, to be fair. But yeah, you can definitely see that somebody has made the decisions like, listen guys, listen devs, you can go out now and talk to players. They didn't have that. They weren't allowed to do that. They are allowed to do that now. Like, I mean, fuck it. I can see in the Rogue Discord. I can see it like in Shaman Discord, in a lot of places where
Ian's interview with Asmongold.
Yeah, Ian interview with Asmongold and Max and all of that. But devs are there, and there's a false conception that if they're gonna talk to theory crafters about classes and stuff, or they're gonna make classes just work for the 1% in world first. No, you'd be surprised how many of these theory crafters are putting casual stuff first before getting into any in-depth stuff. It's like I heard it a million times, you know, from people like Word Up and Guilty Ass and Mandel, you know, like new player traps. I never heard of that concept, but that was something when they talked about talents and builds and stuff, they want to avoid new player traps. What the fuck is that? Well, it's basically, you know, false descriptions of talents that could lead you to believe they do something when it actually does something else. And they're like putting those things ahead when feedbacking stuff. Yep. So that's very, very important. Obviously, you know, they're you know, calculating and simming and doing all of that APL stuff in the back to Simbots, but that's a whole different story. Point is, they are listening, and you can see that directly into the changes, because most of the changes that we saw like happen on these specs and classes and whatnot are a lot of it from ideas from the theory crafters and players given the feedback. So that's super good.
That's super good. And
also, the current state of the world, like the current state of the, let's say, continent, I would call it, right? So the whole Dragon Isles thing, what you can do there, the dungeons that are, I remember like doing dungeons in BFA, Alpha and Beta and Shadowlands and going through the world. That shit was not complete. There was like invisible walls, there was like placeholder stuff over there, some mechanics for mobs didn't work. There was tons of that shit during those 2 development cycles. Not the case in Dragonflight. Sure, there's tuning issues. A lot of the mobs hit way harder than they should, or bosses they hit way slower. But the point is, it's way more complete in terms of like what you're going to expect when you launch the expansion and not have to deal with, oh my god, we have to finish up the X and Y dungeon, oh my god, we haven't finished this part of the world and all that. That used to be a thing in both BFA and Shadowlands development alphas and betas. Doesn't feel to be the case anymore with Dragonflight. Those look very complete in a lot of ways. Again, tuning wise, sure.
Oh yeah, that's always going to be a thing, and tuning is going to happen all throughout beta once a lot of people have access to it, and we can actually test it. Not to mention that we need to test them in Mythic Plus as well, because we don't know how the affixes will affect. Yeah, and then the raids as well. And this kind of can segue into maybe one of the biggest issues that people have had with Shadowlands and BFA, and maybe not as much as with Legion, but also there as well, is the systems. Which, I mean, we've mentioned this before, they've mentioned it before as well, but just in case you've missed it, so far, the systems that, you know, the external things that happen right now in Dragonflight, the only really new thing is the dragon riding, which has nothing to do with player power. It's purely just for fun and interacting with the world. And we can discuss dragon riding and how actually fun it is, and how it makes old flying seem so outdated and outclassed and things like that. But this is the new system, and it has nothing to do with, you know, grinding renown or grinding soul ash to get your legendary or anything like that. And if we're gonna be honest, they're actually revamping a lot of other stuff, like the professions, which are revamping, which indirectly affect loot as well, because some of the biggest positive feedback that we've had from players this season, this tier rather, season 3, season 4 in Shadowlands, is the catalyst creation. Yep. Where you can essentially use that to offset some of the bad luck, and also the NARs as well. The professions are supposed to help you get raid level gear as well, mythic level gear, which is obviously we've done this before, but you could do like maybe one item and you'd have to grind like a gazillion mats. And I remember in BFA where we had some of our tailors craft like a gazillion wrists just to get the stack combination that they wanted. And on top of all of this, the professions, if you haven't seen it yet, they're actually really fun and they're all more interactive. They have a leveling system, they have a quality system, and plus all of that with work orders, which we might cover in a future video. That's also really good. We talked about the talents revamped. And one other thing that people have been concerned about and have been asking for a while, and we probably don't have all the information about it yet, but so far the reputations are revamped, and they're taking a page out of the Renown book in Shadowlands, where we now have levels of reputation. I don't know if they're gonna be called, you know, exalted, honored, whatever, but we have levels with clear rewards and as such. And I'm not 100% sure, but I think they mentioned something that they don't really want to put as much player power into reputations anymore, but they will...
Not at all, actually. It's basically, you're gonna have a very, very similar Renown interface, and it will work because people kind of like are used to it now. And obviously, in terms of like how it looks, sure, it's way better than just blue lines. Okay, so it's definitely a little bit more eye candy. But in terms of like player power, sure, you're gonna get off some starting gear or whatever, depending on what type of reputation you're gonna get into. But it's also mainly get into like the dragon riding thing, and it's all linked to that. Professions looks to be now, like as much as they are much more in-depth and much more complex than they used to be, and they needed that, they look to be like almost like an end game feature, to be honest. I think people will be able to just log into WoW and just choose to do professions, and that will be like it more engaging and more like it will give much more satisfaction than at least the last 5 or 6 years. That's also good. You talked about the systems, external power, and all of that. Yes, they did say this before. We're gonna have to address, like, the talent revamp is basically the whole, I don't know, the biggest magnitude they can possibly deliver on the impact of your class. But there's also the gear that, you know, we know it's external, sure, and also tier sets at some point. So we kind of expect this, and this is it. There's no more, and this, they mentioned this as well multiple times now. It kind of became a broken record whenever I hear about it from lots of the devs going into interviews. We are letting you play the game how you want. So if you want to go the M+ route, go for it. You want to do the raid route, the PvP route, the professions route, go for it. It's all gonna be free for all, and they kind of try to mirror what happened in Mists of Pandaria in a way. Mists of Pandaria was kind of kind of like that in a lot of capacities, right? Where you will have a million things to do, but nothing was mandatory. It was basically to your choosing, as opposed to BFA and Shadowlands and even Legion to some extent, where you had to do X, Y, and Z every fucking day to be able to either not fall behind or to be able to enjoy the game to its full capacity. So in that regard, this is something that we cannot 100% guarantee will happen, because they said this about Shadowlands as well, and we got the fucking domination shards. However, as it stands right now on the alpha, and we're probably, I don't know, in a couple of weeks max, we're gonna get beta and finally test out Mythic Plus and possibly raid testing as well. Then we're gonna see exactly how this will impact the overall gameplay, because for the longest time, people have been kind of like, they don't know how to play the game outside of doing chores every day, right? So this is gonna be, so you're gonna wake up in a world where you would get the feeling, it won't be true technically, but you will get the feeling that there's nothing to do because there's no more chores. So what you have to do is just
have fun
all days, right? Just, okay, let's go do some dungeons, let's go do some dragon riding, and that's it. You don't have to go into Torghast to farm all of that bullshit. You don't have to go into the mall or on Korthia to farm 10 million different rares and find treasures. And no, I mean, sure, there's an option to do that, you know, to find treasures and kill rares and all of that, but it's not gonna bump you up to perform or to enjoy your class or spec to its full capacity, because guess what? Your class will be complete through the talents that you will have. Your bump will come from tier sets and gear doing,
which is what we've been having
normal
for years.
For an RPG, I mean, that's okay.
And to your point, maybe to round it up, maybe one of the biggest thing for some of the people is when you're going to be doing all of this, extra activity, world quests and bonus objectives and reputation farming and all of that, you're going to do it in a different world. And this has never, I don't remember if this was ever a thing that was mentioned about WoW, but we're going back to WoW, man. Because Shadowlands, with its pluses and minuses, it definitely created a disconnect between players and the actual world that we live in. You might like it a little bit more than others, you might not really care about it, but at the end of the day, it is a fantasy world, and now we're going to islands, we're going to fight and befriend dragons, we're not, meeting new races of weird trees and rocks, we're just having centaurs and Tonka back, which are, fan favorites, so let's not talk about that. And so it's a lot of familiarity, which they're building upon, which is great because we did lose the sense of being connected to our world. Sure, Legion was nice, but we've always had demons. Yeah, it was, Argus was a really disconnect, but Argus was like one patch, right? And it was like building upon the demon aspect, because we've known demons in Warcraft for a long time. BFA was slightly weird, we did went to Nashtar, but that was still kind of wowy. But, I have to say, man, dragon riding or not, going through above forests and in mountains and flying around and I'm looking at stuff, I'm finding things like, oh my god, I'm back in WoW, man. I'm back in WoW, and that feeling has been lost, at least for me, and I can imagine for other people as well, for years. So it's one thing to have to do Korthia and grind. It's another thing to do that in a WoW-like zone with centaurs, with mammoths, with dragons and dinosaurs and all of that stuff, which is a fantasy world, not space. Fucking travelers, artificers, and all of that stuff in
cosmic energy.
Yeah.
Now, the familiarity aspect is one thing, but I think nostalgia is a very, very, very potent feeling, especially for the current player base, because I believe right now, like, the people who are still playing are like the OGs or people, there's the OGs, obviously, but there's also a lot of people who, like, started maybe in Legion, maybe in WoD, possibly in BFA, who knows, and, their experience was kind of limited, and for a lot of the people, it may be the first time where they actually get to enjoy that core OG fantasy, like, where yes, you do have a lot more nature-y stuff, like the creatures around are a little bit more akin to like what you know or expect from a fantasy RPG. Sure, afterlife and the spirits and all of that is part of it, and I think Shadowlands, just both quick parenthesis here, Shadowlands would have had the potential to be an amazing expansion. The execution of everything around it, from story to gameplay to grinding to everything, was just poor. We're not like alleviating the possibility of having cool ass fantasy within the realm of death. No, that sounds pretty cool. It's a cool premise, no doubt. But at the same time, it's a no-brainer to just kick it off in places where you do feel you belong, where you do feel you leave an impact, and where you do feel that the world is a little bit more cohesive and it makes a little bit more sense, because it's World of Warcraft, and we had more traditional Tolkienish fantasy within WoW than maybe what's his name? The dude with the old gods. Keep forgetting.
Jesus
Lovecraft.
Christ, Stephen. Oh.
No, Lovecraft. And so with the old gods and all of that.
Yeah, fucking Stephen the King for some reason.
There's this point of nostalgia, and don't get it twisted. Nostalgia is like there's a couple of $1 billion industry, right? We have to remember it's still a company. It's still Activision Blizzard.
We got Illidan back in Legion for a reason, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we cannot be hypocrites here. They have to make the money because they're a company. That's what companies do. But I do have to state this. As much as we are aware and we are not always in agreement with the predatory and disgusting practices of big-ass corporations, especially Activision, I do have to mention that behind all of these games, all of these worlds and, things that happen, there are people there, man. They're people like you and me. Some of them are bad apples. Some of them are good apples. It's not, nothing is black or white, right? So these people, I do believe a lot of them, most of them, are passionate and want the game to be a success.
Oh yeah.
Not everybody has the same image or strategy of success, but so far from what we've experienced, again, comparing to past experiences in development cycles and seeing everything come and go, it's like for the very first time since we're doing content on WoW that we have big confidence on this. It's one of
it's also weirdly positive. Like I'm a little bit like
we're always pumped. Like oh my gosh, shit! Oh
coming into BFA, we're like, man, it's looking good, but I don't know about this Azerite stuff. And Shadowlands is like, man, you know, the Afterlife is looking good, but I don't know about all of this, you know, external stuff and Covenants things, right? Right now, I don't know if we have that. I mean, it's looking good, and we don't have a but. And it would be nice to have a but because it kind of creates like a little safety net. Like, hey, I've called it, right? I'm not fully investing my feelings and my emotions into it because there could be this fallout. But right now, there is no real clear indication that shit can get sour. I mean, it can always do, right? But hey,
no, there's obviously
until proven guilty, you know?
Yeah, of course. There's the concerns are always with the classes and specs, with the talents and all of that. There's still a lot of things to be addressed and so on and so forth. I think that's like the biggest concern you can have for this. But in regards to everything else, it's looking good, and most of the specs and classes are looking decent and good. Again, tuning is a whole different department over there. But just to answer the question that we initially launched at the beginning of the video,
it's been a while.
Is it worth Dragonflight worth it? Is Dragonflight worth to come back to, or you know, to start off playing World of Warcraft? Judging from what's happening now in the early stages, I would say yes.
Yes, I would definitely agree.
And no shilling here, okay? I mean, people who don't know us or who do not follow us for the longest time will say that we're shills. But if you look at a lot of our videos in the past,
especially the lore ones, watch the lore ones.
We never was shy on bashing Blizzard like when it was warranted. Okay, so this is the thing. We're fair. We're trying to be fair. So if things looks positive, hey shit, we're hyped. If things look shit, then we're gonna trash and bash. It's part of like who we are and what we do.
No guardian truth.
But this is the thing. Overall, we're very, very positive on what's happening right now, and we're gonna make a follow-up on this once we get closer and closer to the launch and have like a more, let's say, based opinion on this. But so far, again, I'm stressing this. We've been here through all of the development of BFA and launch, and development of Shadowlands and launch, and now in Dragonflight. It's very different in a very positive manner. So our answer is yes for now. Now, that being said,
oh, thank you.
Say something.
Well, since we pretty much covered everything, so hope this gave you guys a lot more information and a lot more maybe confidence, but obviously you have to make up your own opinions, and you can continue watching our content to see if that opinion will change or will remain the same. And for that, thank you for watching the video, and thank you Patreons for supporting the content we do and everything that we have here. If you want to support us a little bit more, dear viewer, you can check the link down below in the description for our Patreon page. You can find a bunch of stuff there, maybe something there is for you, and maybe you'll find something that you like.
Yeah, he always says that. There's no cookies there, okay? If that's what you want, there's no cookies. But thank you, and we'll have a great day ahead. See you tomorrow with special edition TLF.
And no cookies.
Bye!
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classical retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.